something I've been talking with people about is the idea of making more emotionally vulnerable works. I call it blood. Being disappointed that there isn't more blood in video games. I've been aware this whole time that making bloody, emotional work and releasing it into the world is a dangerous thing. And I comforted myself thinking, okay, I do still want to have these conversations. Anyway, here's my story of dealing with getting my first negative Steam review for the end of gameplay. The review with the big thumbs down, it arrives. I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is great. I get to experience a difficult emotion and engage with some worthwhile criticism. The first time I read that review, I think I was caught up in the very first bit. Since I know you'll be reading this, I thought I should address this directly to you. I found your game incongruent and trite. I'm certain you're a kind and loving person, so I will keep this review to things I would only say directly to your face in person. This initial paragraph was very disarming to me because I felt as though this person was on my side. I was thinking, this is a person who is criticizing me in order to help me get somewhere. And I thought, okay, there's probably something here that I'm not getting. This person is on my side. They are willing to be honest with me about how they feel about my game. I thought of it like presenting my game to a friend. And then I read over the review again, and I started to notice a lot of diminutive, belittling, borderline or not even particularly borderline insulting language. Games as author's expression alone is a very funny idea to have. I think that the word funny in this context is dismissive and not taking it seriously. The poetry paired with the Twinkie-sized pixel environments. Twinkie-sized. In the context of the whole review, I think that its function is to insult the scale of the pixel art. I wouldn't find it a particularly stunning exhibit at the MCA. It's taking another shot at the value of the game. And it's not particularly relevant. I don't understand why you would bring up, oh, your game wouldn't make a good museum and an exhibit. I think that the function of it is essentially just an insult. Here's a shot that I can take at you. I'm not even halfway through the review, but it's riddled with these types of comments. I'm not particularly proud of this, but the response that I had next was to get defensive and dismissive myself. I thought, oh, good, okay. These ambiguous negative feelings that I'm having, they are justified. I am now equipped to completely disregard this whole review because, they're insulting me. How dare they? They don't like my game, but they are not engaging in good faith. Therefore, they have nothing of value to say. And I actually recorded a whole other video. This review, which I regard as taking advantage of this type of vulnerability that I'm displaying, something didn't feel quite right. This didn't feel like it was a way to go forward. I want to be clear, I don't think it's okay that Telephone's review was full of insults that don't really add anything of value except for to be emotionally disturbing to me. However, I thought, what do I want? What do I want out of this? And it was my partner actually who said, I don't think you'll be satisfied until you get a response from this reviewer, from this, yeah. And I thought about it and I was like, you're right. It's the dismissal, this positioning of myself and Telephone as enemies wasn't what I really wanted. What I wanted was to have a dialogue. I knew what I wanted, and I also realized that I needed to employ some kind of emotional management. I don't think the Telephone is being very careful with their words, but what can I do about it? How can I deal with criticism and get something out of these difficult perspectives. So I edited this review for myself. There's a video called How to Argue. One of the parts of this video is about avoiding meta. Meta is when you're in an argument, it captures some logical fallacies. For example, ad hominem arguments are meta in that they are not about the content of the argument. So I set to work cutting out all the meta stuff that was going on. Draken, since I know you'll be reading this, I thought I should address this directly to you. All of that's meta. That's not really saying anything about what we actually want to be talking about. That's just talking about the context surrounding the review. I found your game incongruent and trite. This is the opinion of the writer, and so, but it's relevant at least. It's sort of borderline meta because it's half saying something about the game and it's half saying something about how the writer or speaker feels. I'm certain you're a kind and loving person, so I'll keep this review to things I would only say directly to your face in person. Again, meta. It turns out that it wasn't really about the emotional impact. Structurally, it was also a review that I was having a very difficult time understanding what was being said. I couldn't break it down into things that I understood and didn't understand. It was a big mess. So I used my favorite tool, Canopio, to rearrange parts of the review to stick them into boxes. So there's this one part, games as author's expression alone is a very funny idea to have. In my mind, there's a sliding scale of etc., etc. And I realized that this was just this sort of mini essay inserted into the middle of the review. There are a few things that I identified that were being said by this critical review that I think are interesting things that I want to engage with. And in some cases I have to dismiss them, in other cases it's a much larger conversation. What's your name? Telephone sound ambrosia, if you are watching this, this is the actual non-meta content of my response to your review. And it's this stuff that I think I would like to thank you for sharing. The other stuff, it was difficult to read and I don't think it was necessary. First, I'm going to talk about this mini essay. It's the second paragraph of the review plus a little piece later on. In my mind, there's a sliding scale of how close an observer is tied to an art form. You could also think of this as where its provenance comes from, how it exists in physical reality. Music can only be unless listened to. Paintings can only be when seen. Games only are when played, etc., etc. And the act of playing a game requires a great deal more of audience participation and space for an observer to move and think and react to while you're showing them. Games are exceptional in that way of allowing a person experiencing it to fight back in a sense. And then this is a little bit later. Games are the people who play them. This is an argument that I've heard many times before, and I think that there's a lot of literature written about it, and I really strongly disagree with it. And I think that some of this is actually at the heart of kill gameplay. There's a lot of things at the heart of kill gameplay, but especially this part, games are exceptional in that way of allowing a person experiencing it to fight back. I don't buy it. If you see a painting that you don't like, you can fight back against the painting. We can always fight back against anything. The game captures your ability to fight back, and it gives you this feeling of agency without actually respecting your real agency. The very last section, which is from somewhere in the middle of the fourth paragraph, games are the people who play them. I think that this is the equivalent of saying art is the people who experience it, and I wholeheartedly reject that. I think that's a different thing. I'm not saying that that's not a valuable or extremely valuable part of art and how it exists in the world and how it is experienced, but Telephone says, you could also think of this as where its provenance comes from. I think provenance is a very interesting word to use because the provenance of art is always and only the maker. There's nothing more important to art than the person who makes it because it wouldn't exist otherwise. If you make a piece of art and no one experiences it, if you make a game and no one plays it, the game has still been made. Telephone says paintings can only be when seen. It's just not true. I would be interested in having further conversation about this. I agree that being seen is part of what makes paintings important. It's not like an unseen painting ceases to be a painting. And likewise, an unplayed game does not cease to be a game. The other main thing that I got from this review was a disconnect that Telephone was feeling, a disconnection between the art and its, I want to say my artist statement, but you could also say the marketing. The Steam page says, let's see, the short description of the Steam page is Draken's desperate attempt to explain, explore, or understand kill gameplay. And I think Telephone is engaging with my work on that level. If these 20 bunny level things are the culmination of this idea, then I simply don't believe you. All this talk of kill gameplay, while stapling it to 20-ish poem platformers. Instead of having made this game, you should have just written it down. I get the feeling that Telephone is engaging with the end of gameplay on a, I don't want to say surface level. It's not a surface level, but they are not really looking at the piece itself, but they are looking at it to justify what is being promised that it is. And I think that this is further evidenced by the fact that the Telephone self-admittedly only played the game for 15 minutes. I think that Telephone is doing a fine job of criticizing something that I don't care about, that I don't really care to talk about or improve, which is just how the hell do you sell a video game, and is not talking about the game because they were not very interested in experiencing it as itself. That's not true. There's about 4 statements that were interesting and useful to me. I'm going to remove the part that I find insulting. The poetry paired with the pixel environments felt more like description than anything. I received feedback similar to this from a friend of mine, Eric, who is releasing a game on Steam called Chroma X Electron, and he said something very similar to in some of the levels, not all of them, but in some specific ones, the text and the environment felt like they were just saying the same thing, and that in fact the text was diminishing the interpretive space. It's a different statement, but they are related, and I would be interested to hear more about this, because if I do return to pairing poetry with pixel environments, it's something that I would like to improve at. I think that it's a very interesting craft to me. Then there's, some of it was very hard to read. I know that it's hard to read, but my experiments with changing it to something that is easier to read have so far the results so far have been things that I'm not happy with. But I understand that it is an accessibility concern, let's say. People are going to have trouble reading it. It's similar to translation. I've been working with a few people who are translating the game, and it's the same, right? It's about access. It's like, can you actually experience it? And I think that when I find solutions that I'm happy with, I would like to make it more accessible in that way. This would have been a much more worthwhile experience if I wasn't the one that had to move the bunny around. I think that essentially they're saying that they don't like the bunny's movement. There's not like a lot I can do with that vague of a statement. But it's useful to know that the bunny movement, that they did not find the bunny movement enjoyable. Again, this is something that I could potentially dig into and get more information about. But it's also just at the core of the game. It's kind of inescapable that some people will and some people won't like the bunny's movement. And the last bit, where is it? These specific comments at the end about the oubliettes. The second oubliette was my favorite level. I liked the second oubliette more than the first one because the jagged and vertical geometry was more interesting to jump around in and look at. The first oubliette felt like running around inside an orange. I do think that saying that that the first oubliette feeling like running around inside an orange, it's another one of these sort of needlessly diminutive statements, saying the thing that you made is silly and I'm going to compare it to something silly. It's just kind of irritating seeing your unstated thesis come out in like these little kind of like annoying pokey ways. You could just say it once and be done with it. Anyway, this thing about the oubliettes, one being more enjoyable about the other, it is this tiny concrete statement. It's my brain and I go, oh, okay, like, right, like there's a level of preference. Like this one thing is better than this other, and for specific reasons. This is what I want out of, I found your game incongruent and trite. Tell me, how is it incongruent? Incongruent with what? Why do you feel that way? I can't really do anything with this one word. Like, give me some more to go on. I like the second oubliette more than the first one because the jagged and vertical geometry was more interesting to jump around in and look at. The first oubliette felt like running around inside an orange. Despite what I said, that is descriptive, right? Like an orange is round and you just kind of like boink around, I guess. I wish that more of the review had stuff that like I or another person could grab onto that wasn't just these sort of insubstantiated statements. Ugh. I'm not educated in art theory or whatever. This is not the world that I belong to. And I'm not avoiding this unknowingly or because I don't care, but it's because I don't think I can really do it justice. I do think that your game here is postmodern in that it rejects the current state of modernism in gaming. My pet theory is that games as art lags behind the rest of the world by 80 years, while most forms became influenced by the modern around 1910 and then postmodern around 1945, games reached postmodernity around 2015. We still have both schools of thought running concurrently in all aspects of life, of course. This is obvious. So I am just not nearly familiar enough with modernity and postmodernity to intelligently engage in a conversation about this. I think that there may or may not be something here, but I'm not really given any context to grapple with. Like, what do you mean by modernity or postmodernity? So if I was more of a art history scholar, especially the specific years, like 1910, 1945, the only touchstone that I could possibly have is games around 2015. I think it would take a lot more time for me to do the necessary research in order to have a proper conversation about any of that stuff. I made this video to let the hell go of this. I think that I wanted to talk to people about this experience that I've had because I think that other people have had a similar experience and they might find it valuable to see how I broke it down and dealt with it. Interesting, useful, maybe also validating if you've had an experience like this as an artist or a maker of things. And for Telephone Sound Ambrosia, thank you for your very difficult review. Thank you for the parts of your difficult review that were actually saying something and not just insulting me or my game. If you want to keep talking about anything, I'm here. You can leave a comment, you can message me on Blue Sky, my email's on the internet. Oh, and like, I don't know, you can refund a game on Steam. I went into this with a very clear awareness of how Steam works. I noticed that you are like newish to Steam. I think it said you own like a small number of games and joined Steam in 2022, so I don't know if you are aware of this. You can refund a game on Steam, no problem. I'm not interested in taking advantage of people. Like, I'm not gonna take someone's money in order for them to feel bad about having spent the money. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Video over. That's everything that I wanted to talk about.